Heyo, welcome everyone to Today in the Scene by Indie Arcade Wave. I'm Joe, your host, and here on In the Scene, we dive into what's happening in the arcade scene, from new indie developers, arcade owners and operators, and just news in the space in general. A few things before we dive in: the new t-shirts are available, so definitely check out the Indie Arcade Wave shirts and the Galactic Battleground shirts, as well as our new cabinets. We have the 4-player Konami and the 4-player tabletop. I'll throw all that stuff up on the screen so you can check it out. Now let's dive into this week's episode. I want to talk to another arcade from Canada. It's been a little while since I've talked to any Canadian arcades, and this one definitely caught my eye due to the fact that they have a bunch of games and they have a retro game store in the arcade, which is super cool. If you love one, you probably love both. So why wouldn't you want to check them out? Devon and Maeve join us to tell the story of Pixel Paradise Arcade in Ontario. Welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad you guys are able to come on and tell us a little bit about the arcade. Let's just jump into intros. Let us know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and when did you fall in love with video games?
Well, my name's Maeve. I grew up in Ireland. I moved here 2 years ago. Well, over 2 years ago now, and I met himself. I had never been in an arcade actually until I met him and seen his one, and I was blown away. But I've always been in love with video games since I was young. I have a much older sister that's a software developer and used to own her own game developing company, and she was a huge influence in my life. So that's where my love for games started.
I'm Devon. I'm the owner here. The first game I kind of started playing was Donkey Kong 64 on the N64 and Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. I've loved video games my whole life. Started collecting arcade machines 7 or 8 years ago. I was on my lunch break at work one day, and there was one on Craigslist for $400, and pulled the trigger and just been adding more ever since. So
Good old Craigslist. Everyone's start to the collection, right? You find something on there you like, and then there's so much more you can get. Let's talk about Pixel Paradise Arcade. Let us know how it started. Like, how did it go from an idea to an actual physical location?
we didn't start as an arcade. I never thought that I was going to own an arcade. I never planned that. I had 5 or 6 cabinets in my basement, and they were taking up space. And I had a computer repair shop in a small town, and I had some space in the lobby that I had to fill up. I stuck 4 games in there and just kind of called it a day. And then, as time went on, we realized that kids would just kind of hang out in the lobby. And in the same building, we had a neighboring business that was a hair salon, and they were moving out. So we had another 600-700 square feet to play with, and I stuck the rest of the collection in there, bought some more games, and
Outgrew the space.
yeah, it went well. So after about a year, we moved to a slightly larger city, Angus. Still quite small, only 13,000 people, but we had initially about 1,500 square feet, filled it up with, I think, 30 or 40 games. Unfortunately, we only got 2 weeks in that space until the pandemic hit, and we kind of had rolling shutdowns and whatnot. But over the last few years, we've added 2 more units. We've got 5,800 square feet now, and we've got nearly 130 games on the floor. So never thought we'd have this much, but here we are.
Yeah, I love to hear the expansion, the growth. You outgrew your first space. You need to move to a bigger one. It's always great to hear that our kids are growing. Just to see a story like yours where you start by buying one game off Craigslist and all of a sudden you have an arcade with 130 games. That's really cool to me. What kind of games can people expect if they come to your location? What are they going to be able to play?
Well, we've got titles from the early 80s all the way up until mid 2010s. We've got a handful of classics: Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Asteroids, Space Invaders. We've got kind of a heavier focus on 90s games and a decent selection of rhythm games nowadays. Some of our bigger titles that we have is we've got 7 Linked Rush 2049s, which are a huge hit for multiplayer. We've got 2 DDRs, one Pump It Up, and a second one on the way. Guitar Freaks, Drum Mania. We have every Time Crisis except for 5, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and Crisis Zone. We've got a bunch of Sega Deluxe cabinets like Top Skater, Water Ski, Soul Surfer, some big Namco games like Downhill Bikers, Alpine Racer. Honestly, just so many games.
There's a load of games in here. There's a lot of games.
I love the really big ones, like you said, like the downhill racer and all that stuff. You don't see those a lot in a lot of like arcade bars here in the US because they care so much about what game is going to make the most money in the square footage, even though the arcade bars are making most of their money on alcohol. So for a location like yours to have so many of those big box Sega games that are like big interactive physical games, I think that's really cool to have in your collection, and it's definitely makes you a little more unique than some of the other arcades. So let's talk about what the average day looks like for you, Devon, Maeve. What does a day in the life in the arcade look like for each one of you?
Well, for me, it's very different than his experience because he's the one that does all the technical stuff, and I'm more the front of house person. So I do a lot more interactions with the customers when they come in, and the children and stuff because we got a lot of young children and young families coming in. So yeah, opening up the store, turning on all the games with our magic iPad because we have smart plugs and it's amazing. Yeah, and then getting the redemption set up. Meanwhile, he's tinkering with stuff in the back and fixing it, making sure everything works okay for the day. Yeah, that's about the limit as far as I go. I'm more of the front of house person.
For me, yeah, I do all the maintenance, and these games are not they're not new, so things are kind of not constantly breaking down, but there's about an issue or two every few days. I think the longest period we had was we just had a period of 3 weeks with nothing actually breaking down or any severe issues, but unfortunately, one of our games went down the other day. But yeah, typically I'll be found in the back, working on things, putting out new games, helping people in the back. Unfortunately, as a necessary evil here, we've got a small redemption center, so you'll find me restocking tickets all the time and just taking care of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good that you guys are kind of dividing the way that it needs to be dealt with. You've got front of store, and then you've also got the maintenance part, which is probably the least fun and most expensive part of owning the arcade. I mean, maybe other than like the electricity bill, but like it's all stuff that's necessary and it's getting done. It seems like you guys have it very well segmented. I'm curious about what games earn. You mentioned you have a redemption space kind of as a necessary evil. What games earn the most for you, and would you recommend to other arcade owners that are looking to open an arcade to put into their locations?
So redemption obviously earns the most, and I for years I swore I would never have redemption in here, but I finally got worn down. We're the only entertainment facility in town, and we had so many young kids coming in here saying, "Where are the tickets? Where are the
Where are the
tickets?"
prizes?
So we finally gave in, and we've got about I think 20 games, 20 redemption games in the very back, and that keeps the kids busy, and that probably earns the most. But short of that, my focus and what I think earns the most, or at least based on the coin buckets that we're pulling out, is the unique games that you can't experience at home and the multiplayer games. One thing that I've really tried to focus on is if we have a racing game, we have three, four, five of them. We've got three Daytonas, three Hydro Thunders with a fourth just coming out, seven Rush 2049s. It's all about bringing in your friends and playing together so that you're not, online or whatever. It's a nice break from the online gaming nowadays.
So I think that's what really sets us apart from other arcades that we've personally been in because we try to visit as many as we can when we're out and about. And I've noticed what sets us apart really is the opportunity of the amount of games you can play with other people. I've been in other arcades and barcades and stuff like that on date nights and stuff, and it's not fun because we can't play together. Like we're kind of left doing your own thing. Whereas here, there are an enormous amount of games. Most of the games you can play together, more than two people. So.
Right. I think that's super important. I mean, the whole idea of the arcade is to, bump shoulders with your neighbor, play some games, get to know each other, talk a little bit of trash. Like it's a community thing. And that's why I think a lot of the indie arcade games are doing well is because you're building a community around a game. And that's something that's lost in my eyes with the online multiplayer games is you can develop friends and everything, but you're gonna talk way more smack online than you will if you're right in someone's face. Like you're gonna be a little bit smarter about it, a little more calculated. So it becomes like a constructive trash talking, I guess you could say. I noticed that you guys have a retro game store in the arcade, and I think that's really cool. It's super unique. I don't know that I've ever seen, maybe one more in the US, but I don't think I've seen that really ever. How did that start, and why did you decide to add that to the arcade?
That actually kind of came before the arcade did as well. Kind of as a bridge between the computer shop and the arcade, we started just selling used games as well. I mean, I always like I had a large collection of my own stuff, Xbox, PlayStation, etc. It just kind of felt like a natural progression. Nowadays, it's not our main focus. If you're looking for specific titles or something, you're better off going somewhere that's really focused on it, because it's hard for us to balance the used games section and the arcade. But we do still have a few shelves in here, and if any common titles, we get a lot of people who just love to browse, especially parents while their kids are running around, or friends waiting on other friends or whatever. So
Yeah, it adds one more thing to the location for people to come in, hang out, look at, maybe buy, and it's definitely a unique angle that you guys took. I think that's cool.
Actually, I have something to say about the used
Go for
games
it.
that I just remembered. It's really fun watching really young kids come in and they look at our more retro section, but has things as new as the GameCube and DS's. And they'll come up and they'll look at the DS games and they'll be like, "Oh my God, they're so old!" And it just hurts right here in the feelings to think that kids think DS games are old.
Right, I find that funny just because it's on a cartridge, like it's super, super old. Digital downloads are a really big thing now, so it makes perfect sense. But yeah, I mean, I'll take an N64 cartridge over a digital download any day. I mean, the physical is like it feels rewarding to find that game that you've been looking for. Like I've been collecting a lot of GameCube stuff, and it feels so good to find that box and manual and everything that they don't have anymore. You know, you buy new Switch games, there's no manual in it. It's just the game, which is so weird to me. But let's talk about the indie arcade scene. I know you guys said you knew of a few games. What do you guys think about the developers that are creating these new games, and do you think there's any value in this in the future?
yeah, no, I love it. I mean, we don't have any here. I'd love to get some. I think anyone who's kind of working towards making new arcade games, whether it be like full games or just parts, or even something that you can kind of put in a cabinet yourself, I think all of that's great, because it just adds to the arcade scene, really. We've seen a few of them. We've seen them in other locations. I've heard that they do well. And again, I'd love to get some in here, but I don't. I mean, I feel like they're not quite super accessible to smaller arcades. We've kind of done some research, and I find that it's kind of hard to actually get them here. Sort of a yeah.
I'd love to get the new charge one.
Yeah.
I would love that. Like I was so excited when I found out somebody put that in an arcade cabinet. I was so excited. I was like, "Can we have this? It's a bit pricey for us right now, but if we had the money, I would be like, let's get this immediately."
Yeah, I think Nidhogg 2 has been doing great. Dan did really good stuff with working with Messhoff to get that one out. The game is awesome, and I don't know exactly what the move would be with, you know, shipping them to Canada. I don't know if there'd be any kind of like customs issues, or what the logistics of that would look like, but I definitely should look into that, because that's an interesting thought to me. And I'm glad that you guys have seen some of them. You like them. I'm curious, for the last question that I got for you guys, I'm curious about your favorite retro games. It's always a super hard question, especially since you're both into, you know, the arcade and the retro stuff. Let's hear your top 5 retro games of all time.
I can't genuinely don't think I can answer this question.
Just give me
'Cause I don't.
five solid ones, even if they're not like your top 5, just 5 that you really like.
Yeah, but what's considered like actually retro though?
The retro's always changing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Let's draw the line at like 360 PlayStation 3 ballpark. Even though that's like not really that retro, but
Oh, are we talking about like retro games in general, not
Yeah.
just arcade
Yes,
cabinets? Oh,
anything.
okay. I love Ocarina of Time. I love Majora's Mask. I loved Wind Waker, if that's still considered retro, is it? I don't know. I'm a
GameCube,
bit younger
yeah.
than you, so. um, I know all the Zelda games. I'm just a Zelda nerd. What else can I think of? I love the Star Fox games. Here I am just spouting out all Nintendo games.
Whatever works.
What's my fifth one? I'm sure as soon as I'm finished this, I'll think of like 10 more that I should have said.
Like how you're looking in the cabinet.
Yeah,
She's looking for ideas here.
Yeah, I'm like, what else do I like?
You got it, or?
Nah, you go ahead.
All right. For me, I'm a '90s kid, so early 2000s is my jam. But I'm gonna have to say DK64, Banjo-Kazooie, Rush 2049 is my favorite arcade game, hands down. Big fan of Halo, and this is gonna be way out there, but SimCity 4 for the PC. I don't know if that's retro, but
Okay,
Yeah,
SimCity. That's a good one actually. That's not one a lot of people mention, but those games were really big back in that time. I mean, like early 2000s. That was the jam. I remember that stuff. Yeah, I like the games. Obviously, like it's hard to not mention a lot of the Nintendo games. They're just so iconic. They're still running now. I mean, you know, you look at Zelda, it's all the way back to the NES. Even like the Game and Watch systems, like you can go that far back with that franchise. So a lot of people are gonna love it, and there's no way around that. That's really all that I had for you guys. So I'm going to just throw it back to you. Give a shout out to all your social medias. Let people know where to find you, and they can follow your journey there.
yeah, I guess Instagram, Facebook, our website, just Pixel Paradise Arcade, or our website directly, pixelparadisearcade.ca.
And we're located at 3 Massey Street, Unit 14, Angus, Ontario,
Canada.
Canada.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time, telling us the story of the arcade, talking about the games that you guys love. If you're still watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton. We can tell more stories of other arcades like this. The wave will continue to grow. We can all ride it together. And don't forget about the t-shirts and the arcade cabinets for Galactic Battleground. But until next time, peace.